again. I am back with another car from my private collection. In the first car podcast, I showed my '89 Corvette convertible. And towards the end of that podcast, I mentioned the next car I was going to show was 1984 Porsche 944. Now, this car, my father bought it back in 1996. It had belonged to a friend of his who bought it brand new. This gentleman was a doctor. He bought it brand new in 1984. And he gave us a ride in this car back because my father and I were car enthusiasts, and he bought a new Porsche. He gave us a ride, but at the time, my father wasn't particularly impressed because he and I were sitting in the back, tiny little seats. My mother was sitting in the front. My father's friend was driving, and he was driving fast, and he was whipping it around corners, and my father and I sitting in the little seats at the back, and my father wasn't impressed, But about 12 years later, the gentleman's wife passed away. She was ill, and he gave the car to his son, who also became a doctor, but he used it for a year. It was not practical for him at the time. He bought a Jeep. He gave it back to his father, and his father asked my father, said, you want to buy the Porsche? And my father said, I didn't really like it all that much, but we said, let's go have a look at it. And it was like brand new. It had about 90,000 kilometers, at the time. It was 12 years old, and we drove it. My father drove it, and I drove it, and we loved it. You enjoy this car much more if you actually drive it. And it's a 5-speed shift, not a lot of horsepower, 150 horsepower. By today's standards, that's not a lot. A new Mazda 3 is about 150 horsepower. But back then, it was quite a bit. Now, this is a 4-cylinder engine, and in the Corvette podcast, I said that between the two cars, for me, it's 50-50. The Corvette has more power in a straight line. You put your foot in the accelerator, it shoots. This one doesn't have that kind of acceleration, but this one, you can whip it around corners. So we bought it back in 1996, and in 24 years, we have done another 30,000 kilometers. So we hardly use it. Take it to car shows. I actually took it to a car show in town last night. Informal car show at a Canadian Tire parking lot. And just pull into a spot, and there are other cars there. There are newer cars, there are older cars, some people with some new Corvettes, some newer Porsches, some older Porsches, some American cars, and people just sit by their cars, talk about them. A couple of people came and admired it, and a guy took some pictures. So it's now done, as I said, about 120,000 kilometers. We have all the other cars, we have daily users, take it to occasional car shows. Now, some of the features, this car has got pop-up headlights, and in the Corvette podcast, I showed you how the Corvette headlights are permanently up. Well, these ones, they go up and then they come back down. What doesn't work on this is the antenna. The antenna has erection problems. You have to do it manually. So I'm now going to show you some of the other features of the car. Now, one of the odder features of this car, and I showed it to an acquaintance a couple of months back, and she thought it was one of the oddest things she's ever seen. But one of the little features of this car, and it was an extra. I have the original bill of sale from when my father's friend bought it, and this option cost $310 back in 1984. So $310 in 1984 would be like $600-700 today. But the option was an alarm. However, the new cars, you press the remote and you go beep beep and you lock the car. This one, you would you put up the windows, you'd lock the car here like this, So you put your key in, you lock. This does not have power door locks. And then what you do is you take a second key and you put it in here. And this is the alarm. So when you turn it like this, I haven't turned it on in the 23 years we've owned the car. So I don't want to turn it on now and have the car start beeping and booping, But I've never used it, But this is actually the alarm. So when you turn it like this, then the car, and then when you come back, you have to remember to take your key, put it in there, and turn off the alarm. So this was one of the first, one of the early examples of, factory alarm systems. This was before the time of remote locking. Now, it's kind of odd. This car, he's got the alarm, which costs $310. It's got the sunroof, and it's a partial power sunroof. And that was a $1,200 option back in 1984. The leather interior was about $500. The car itself, with all the options, with tax, came to $35,000 in 1984. So in today's money, that would be about $70,000. And that's about right, because that's the starting point of a Boxster these days. And this was the equivalent of the Boxster. This was the entry-level Porsche back then. Now, this Porsche is also a little unusual because back then, it was one of the very few that was front engine. The engine is in the front in this. In most of the Porsches, they're rear. Now, I'll show you the wheels. Now, these were optional wheels. These were 15-inch. They're called, and you got to be careful when you pronounce this. They're called Fuchs. 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 It's spelled F-U-C-H-S. Fuchs. So it sounds a lot like a rude word, but it's not. It's not with F-U-C-H-S. Fuchs. Now these are specially built wheels for Porsche. Fuchs does wheels for 911s, and they did a limited number of wheels for 944s. And they're, as I said, they're dedicated Fuchs wheels for Porsche. This was an option. I need to get the aluminum part refinished. That should be like shiny. But remember, this car is 35 years old. This car is the same age as my producer. This is the same age as the person holding the camera. A previous member of the crew kind of joked that the car is aged better than the producer. But I don't think it's true. So this is a 35-year-old car. Back then things were different. Now I want to show you a little bit of the inside. So we'll open it up, and this is the leather interior. And I will sit inside. You have to kind of climb down. This is the leather interior, and then it's a 5-speed, and I'll show you this. This is the semi-power sunroof. So I'm going to press a button here, and you'll see how the roof it just pops up that much. So I press it like this, it goes up. Then what you have to do is, I've never done it. My father has done this years ago. There's 2 latches there. So it's really a 2-person job. I think my father used to manage it by himself. But you undo those latches, you pull this whole thing out, and then there's a little pouch. There's a leather pouch in the back. So you put the thing in the pouch so it doesn't get scratched, and then you put it in that back area. So, and that was a $1,200 option. So I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have a power gizmo just to raise the thing up 2 inches. I could have just pushed it, but I think they probably did that because they're charging $1,200. They want to justify it, and they go, "Oh, it's a power sunroof." Well, it's not really power. It tilts up with power, but it's not really a power sunroof. Now the interior, you can see it's mint. There's the seats. There's no tears. There's no. It's 120,000 original kilometers. And it's the 5-speed shift. The shift of the clutch still very good. Tight, very, So this is the number. Like I said, for me, it's 50-50 between this and the Corvette. I love them both. I enjoy driving them both, but they're completely different personalities. This is German engineering, and the other one is American flat-out power. That one you don't want to whip it around the corner. This one you can. Now, another thing that I want to tell you about this car, and we will come back to this later, is that this is the car that my father was driving last year, and he was 88 years old at the time, and he was driving this car, and then he got into an accident, but not in the car. He got out of the car. He was driving it. I went into the car, into the ditch in another car, and he got out of this car, and then he got hit. And it's a long story. I will tell you more of the story in a further podcast, because one of our cars, was totaled in that. Our Sebring was completely destroyed in that accident, Sebring convertible. And I got out of the Sebring. I was in the Sebring. I got out of the Sebring without a scratch. This car came out of the accident without a scratch. The poor Sebring deceased. My father survived. It's a good story in that my father was injured, but even at the age of 88, he survived and he recovered, and now he's gone out of the country with my mother. So I will tell you that story, and I will talk about the Sebring, which in a way saved my father's life. But this is the car that he had been driving, but this car was not injured in the accident. So this has been the Nutty Professor talking about car number 2. So next car podcast, we'll do another one of the German cars, either the old Mercedes or the old BMW convertible. So as I said in the first podcast, cars are an addiction as well, but they're less dangerous than some addictions. Almost as expensive. These are expensive to maintain. So I'm very lucky that I have this that I can rechannel energy into. And it takes a lot of time. You got to take the car, get this done, get that done, bring this one, take that one. I had to get them all certified, the ones that were not in my name. So they're all in my name now. This car has historic plates because it's over 30 years old. So in the next podcast, we'll do another one of the German cars. So, in the meanwhile, this is the Nutty Professor. Happy motoring if you're a motorist. Bye.